Rainy Memorial Lecture, and also as we commemorate Africa Day. My job is to welcome you on behalf of the co-hosts, Fahamu, who are represented by Eve, who's sitting there at the back, Feminix, represented by Dina, and the CCPAU, represented by Achieng, who has just come straight from the airport, so we're very glad that she made it, as well as other individuals such as Lumi and Jana, who have also been part of supporting and arranging this memorial lecture. And of course, there are a host of other people who have been involved who may not necessarily be here in Nairobi or here in the room today. This event today is part of other commemorations that are taking place in other parts of the continent. There is a commemoration this afternoon in Abuja, in Nigeria, and there was one this morning in Harare, in Zimbabwe. As you all know, the theme of our memorial event today is towards a new wave of Pan-Africanism in light of growing violent extremism. So while it's not my job to talk necessarily to the theme, I thought it might be important to just make note of a few things. For instance, the resurgence and persistence of conflicts in places such as South Sudan, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, together with the ever-deepening radicalization, extremism, and even populism, have serious implications on democratic Pan-Africanism and regional integration on our continent. All things that the late Tajudeen stood for and worked for. And so, of course, because of these phenomena, there's a need for us to be asking certain questions and providing some responses as well to these, and ask what is the developmental and democratic Pan-Africanism. If a glance at the state of our continent today reveals the rise of securitocracy, as well as perhaps populism as a response to some of these phenomena. Countries on our continent are becoming more and more securocratic in their outlook and policy positions, combined with more reliance on the West for security. Many of our post-independence or post-liberation states have not developed much in terms of security for the broader society, but have taken more from society than they have given. And at the same time, elections, which we have faithfully every so often, haven't necessarily delivered the democracy that they are supposed to, and in fact have been stolen or captured. So what then is the importance of Pan-Africanism in 2017 and as we go forward? Arguably, Pan-Africanism has never been so important as at this time. For example, the increased violence against blacks. We only have the Black Lives Matter campaign to look at. The new or not so new threats to security of Africans, for example, violent extremism. Right here in Kenya, we face these threats. The resurgence of xenophobia or other anti-Pan-African phenomena such as Afrophobia, as the late Tajudeen would have referred to it. There are several challenges that this new wave of Pan-Africanism is faced with. These challenges, again, are not necessarily new and formed the basis of the late Tajudeen's activism and organizing. For example, the challenges of state formation and nation building. We only have to look at neighboring South Sudan to see the unraveling that is taking place before the nation or the state has even formed. The entrenchment of external control of African economies by not only Western but also Eastern forces. So, for instance, the acquisition of large tracts of land across our continent, or the looting of mineral resources and outright ownership and monopolies over businesses. The establishment and entrenchment of external military and security surveillance and presence on the continent, for example, AFRICOM. And then I think a very big one, which is something that we occupy our time thinking about here at the African Leadership Center, is the need to take responsibility and leadership on this continent. This continues to be a challenge. For instance, our leaders talk at a rhetorical level about African unity, about African solutions to African problems, speaking and acting in one voice, but at the same time, their policy and policy implementation responses do the exact opposite. For example, we see increased restrictions of movement of people, the closing of borders, an area that perhaps Achieng may speak to later in some of the work they're doing at the CCPAU. We also see that our leaders prefer to deal with non-African entities for solving the challenges of the continent or devising development agendas. For example, the presence of more African leaders at China and Japan summits and conferences than at the African Union Summit. And in all of this, we see the perpetuation of violent masculinities, of patriarchy, and age-old negative ethnicity shaping the politics of our continent, the economics, and the leadership. And I think of greatest concern is the impact of all of this on the next generation, and hence the need for a new wave of Pan-Africanism. These challenges have created and deepened a sense of alienation amongst young people, an alienation from a state that they see as unable to create security or to create jobs, an alienation from economies that are designed to serve the interests of external parties, alienation from institutions, public institutions that are often so corrupted that they are of little to no relevance to this generation or to the generation of young people. And we see, of course, scores of our young people dying in the Mediterranean, trying to escape to Europe, where even there, they are not wanted. This generation has been neglected by the state, the economy, society, even the imperial centers that they're trying to get to, and they find solace and meaning and even identity in narrow religious and ethnic nationalism. Not all of it violent, though. And though not violent, violence is a means of mobilizing, activism, and expressing themselves. As Africans in this generation, we seriously risk losing our futures if we fail to attend to our leadership, our value base, and our socio-economic policies. The challenge ahead of us is enormous, as Tajudeen would have said. We have no choice but to organize and not to agonize. We have to organize against imperialist domination, patriarchal domination, racism, sexism, and other fundamentalisms that nurture violent extremism. Here at the African Leadership Center, our mission is to train the next generation of African leaders in peace, security, and development, and to generate knowledge through research based on their lived realities, and to design and craft policy and practice responses to some of the continental peace and security challenges. We also aim to establish a cadre, or contribute to establishing a cadre and a critical mass of actors, thinkers that will lead in the future. Indeed, another Africa has always been possible, but now it is overdue. Welcome to the African Leadership Center. Welcome to the celebration of one of Africa's most committed Pan-Africanist and gallant fighters for Africa's liberation and future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shumai. What a fantastic start, and I think those were very fiery, very uplifting words that she has shared with us this afternoon. I think one of the things that's special that Shumai has referred about today for all of us that are here is not only the opportunity to reflect and to talk about our continent, but it's really to celebrate the life of one of our dear brothers, Tajudeen. And so before we go into any further discussion, we are gonna play a short video that I hope will make us smile here and there. Take.
May I also, on behalf of the Secretariat, welcome you, brothers and sisters, and as the late brother Malcolm have said, friends and enemies. The road that we have treaded to reach here has not been an easy one. Despite all the good intentions that precipitated its holding, there have been, unfortunately, forces that have worked and continue to work that this conference does not take place in this country. But I think we have to focus our attention on the central issue, the unity of our own people and the threat of the colonization that faces us, and whatever program of action we can agree on a minimum level. There are probably 100 issues. Probably this Congress could only agree on 20. I think Africans must get out of the habit of defining ourselves in negative terms, anti this, anti that, without knowing what we are for. But these are challenges of organization. Because we are African people, does not mean that about 1 billion of us should agree. But the embassy at this Congress should be on what we agree, opposed to what we never agree on. Because we share different ideological, political, personal, and class perspectives. But I think the African people face a crisis. We can agree from the extreme left to the fascist right, we can agree. At the Pan-African Center, we can agree that Africa faces a crisis and it is the responsibility of African people to resolve those crises for themselves. So let's concentrate on those issues that unite us and those programs that we can take forward to fight this recolonization of the African continent and turning African people at home and abroad to that objectionable sociological term of declassing elements. For the next 5 days, we'll be talking about the problems of Africa. One of it is technology. A great deal of it, and I'm glad that workshop on communication and the workshop on science and technology is taking place. Because in December, I give you as an example, in December when we rescheduled the Congress, it was very easy to see brothers and sisters down in the office, bring the Caribbean, bring America, bring the rest of Europe, tell them the Congress was off. Getting through to Tanzania, we couldn't. And Tanzania is really next door. What is responsible for that? On the development, the technological aspect of on the development. Those are practical realities that our people face, and these practical realities defeat any semantic or rhetorical differences or sectarian differences that we may have amongst ourselves. It is those realities that we need to address ourselves to if we are serious about the liberation of this continent. If we are serious about preventing this ideology of so near yet so far that makes Tanzania unreachable, yet will reach France and London and New York. Many places, many of you send taxis. You went through. Then you said the Secretariat is not responding to us. The Secretariat is not in a position to respond because it requires a full day to send a fax through to West Africa, down the road there. Then we resorted to courier services. Courier services that are not owned by Africans, owned by forces that are opposed to Africa. They tell you that we cannot reach the Gambia. Let the Gambians go and take their courier from Dakar. Not only that, it is cheaper to send these courier services to Europe than to send it to Kenya next door. So I asked one of these brothers in the courier service, why should it cost me 50,000 Uganda shillings, which is $50 US, to send this thing to Tanzania? And it cost me 27,000 Uganda shillings to send it to London or to send it to New York. So, you see, there are more frequent flights between London. No, there aren't. There are only about 3 or 4. There is a flight every day between Nairobi and at least 2. But the bottom line of it is that it is not an economy that we control. It's an economy that is controlled by others and shaped in the interests of others. Those are the realities that we need to confront. And how to break them down should be our responsibilities. The Pan-African movement was originated by individuals, but individuals with a difference. They cared enough to sacrifice their time and energy to make sure that our people meet with a focus. I did not think Dr. B.B. Du Bois was elected by anybody to convene all those 5 congresses. Kwame Nkrumah got the mandate later. John Barrow was never even any elected post. I think we must shy away from some of these bourgeois conceptions of democracy that says until somebody makes a tick against your name, they cannot act. What we need to do is to find with these individuals, outstanding something, the result of which we are the ones who are here. and see how we can broaden the scope and the content, of what they have been able to do. But this cynical, petty bourgeois attitude, should not be part of the Pan-African movement. It has been a committee guided by just one principle. Do you agree that we should hold this Congress? Are you willing to work for it? Then let's do it together. It has not been all harmony in the NDC. But then, Kwame Nkrumah reminds us, an organization is not a refuge. It is a center of struggle. There are different views, personalities, ideologies, and interests. But the bottom line must be the unity of our people, both at home and in the continent, and both at home and abroad, and also a unity of action. The last Congress, as we all recall, took place 20 years back, of even greater significance to the last between the 6th and 7th Congresses, however, is a challenger for the African people today. The Congresses of the past concern themselves with problems of slavery, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. Today, we are to deal with re-enslavement and recolonization. The situation that confronts us is not similar to that of someone who has been beaten by the rain and got a place to dry himself or herself out, is scared of the prospect of being pushed back into the rain. This is a situation that not only calls for a new approach, but also one that is of immediate practical response. So, as we convert to this 7th Pan-African Congress, I call upon all of you to stay clear of posturing and permit the African people to get down to the actual business of tackling their problems. On behalf of the IPC and the Secretariat, I welcome you to the 7th part and hope we have a very fruitful Congress.
Fantastic to have technology, isn't it? I think we can endeavor to make sure that we send everybody the links so that we can always have an opportunity to listen to Taju again. Yeah. What is really sad is how the challenges he's talking about are still so relevant, and that was 1994. The cost of flying from here to India versus the cost of flying from here to the Gambia. You can't even compare the costs. So anyway, that's what we are here to talk about and find solutions. So before we proceed, I just wanted to just advise that if you'd like to use the bathrooms, the washrooms, if you go out of the door at the back, there is a set of stairs on your left. If you go up for the gentlemen, you just continue straight, and for the ladies, you turn right and you go down the corridor. You will see the conveniences there. And we're asking you, because it's a public facility, please just make sure that you are watching your belongings and you are ensuring that they're keeping safe. So we just want to take time to continue remembering Taju. And if you love tweeting like I do, our hashtag is Taju Memorial, as in TADJU Memorial, as in TAJU Memorial, one word. You've got that, Taju Memorial, TAJU Memorial, one word. I'm going to ask Mwaura to kick us off this memory lane of remembering our brother Tajudeen. Mwaura had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time working closely with Taju, but I'm not going to tell the story for him. I'm inviting Mwaura to come up. And then I'm also going to open it to the floor for all of us who had different experiences of, our experience of Taju, but I'm not going to give an opportunity to everybody. I'm sure you all want to go home at some point, so I'll just take a few people.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bora Kara, and I'm gonna offer my reflections about Taju from a young person's point of view, in the sense that my interaction with him was because the joint organization is the youngest member of the organization, so I remained an officer with no terms of reference. So I was supposed to be doing youth coordination, but I ended up, I would take his clothes to the laundry, I would go fix his aerial, I would go and check if he closed the water in the house, and all these small extensions of duties and responsibilities opened me to an interaction with Taju that went beyond what my terms of reference were within the office. So I ended up being a member of the staff who did not have very definite terms of reference. It not only gave me an opportunity to have closer conversations with him, but it also opened me to interaction with many other people, because when he was away, his home was welcome for many other guests. So when he was away, I had the instructions to go pick his visitors from the airport, take them to the house, make sure that they're comfortable within Nairobi, and it also opened me to that opportunity of interacting and sharing with many other people. And a few incidences I would like to point out. There's around, the henchman, the person who carries the staff in the office would want to refer me because I would be seen carrying his bags along. So he tags me along to BBC, and we walk into the interview, and everybody's putting on earphones. So I asked, should I sit outside? They said, you're inside the interview room. Sit and participate just like any other, So I ended up in a conversation that I was not prepared for, but you have to learn to think on your feet and all that. Then I challenged him around his visions for Africa, in the sense that I told him that he was a bit closed up on how he engaged, because he had his family was in London. So I told him, the pro-democracy activists who want to blame our leaders for all the challenges and fail to connect the issues from colonization and all that. And that got us having a longer conversation around how then, yes, he accepts the blame, but he says, how do you engage within your space to create change, rather than trying to build scenarios that are non-existent. And it was also fortunate that Thomas David was in the office then. He was a colleague then, and we had formed the African connection with Thomas David, and we argued that Taju was one representative of the so-called pro-democracy activists who are not truly seeking to address the root cause of issues in Africa. And this led to a process of creation of a discussion process called the Forum for African Affairs, as a public platform for people to come and engage on African issues in their different ways and offer different issues. So, but for me, as a young person, what hit me most and what I have come to appreciate in essence, and this was his quip, that it doesn't matter who gives you the gun, it's the direction you point that gun. So, in essence, I should stop questioning his affiliations with the United Nations, his slow way of engaging and all that, but see what that opportunity creates what that situation creates an opportunity where people can interact and engage on different issues. And for that, we are able to have that forum that people came to discuss different issues and engage on many other issues. But what was not lost was his passion for young people. So, and this is a form because every other meeting I went with him, officially or non-officially, he insisted that I had to take my space as a young person. In 2007, after the post-election violence, so there was a meeting at Serena. So he invited me to Serena on a Saturday. I was there with a t-shirt and jeans and sandals. So we go to Serena and I'm saying, okay, let me go wait at the pool. He said, you walk with me. So I got myself in a room, the so-called powerful rooms of negotiations. And he said, I can't contribute as a Kenyan. This is a Kenyan young man who needs to make ideas known of the future of his country. So his passion for young people was ever felt. I was fortunate enough to take a journey across Africa, discussing African issues, a journey with young people and all that. But a key challenge to young people, and even to the discourse as is put out now of African rising, was that it's good to be angry, but how to channel that anger. And getting back to the context of it doesn't matter who gives you the gun, it's the direction you point that gun to. It's what opportunities are there for young people to mobilize, to organize, and to engage proactively, rather than just sitting back and assuming that the world owes them an explanation, the world owes them a space. We've gotten to a point where young people keep on lamenting and trying to engage from a very reactive point of view. But his passion for time was to push young people to be more conscious enough that opportunities are there. Opportunities are not given, you have to fight for those opportunities. But when you lay claim for those opportunities, you must be ready to act within the moments as they were. And the long of it is that I got to understand what in essence means when they say that it's a protracted struggle. That the struggles of yesteryears, as much as they inform the struggles of today, the engagements must be viewed with different lenses. And for that you can be able even to see the different faces or the different lives of Taju, from when he was Secretary General of the Pan-African movement to when he was regional director of the UN Millennium Campaign. And he kept on and told me that as you grow older, you become more rational. And he referred me to go and read Fidel Castro, which I did. And the argument is that as you grow older, different insights open up, different ways of engagement open up. They do not water down on your radicalism, but they just show you different opportunities of engagement. But for him, he said, for young people, is that we have less things to defend. So the rationality threshold should be minimal. So we have that opportunity to do more things than you do at a different age. So these are lessons that I've picked. I've continued to engage them within my interaction with professionally and personal life. And one thing that he pushed was this politics of identity, politics of label. He was Dr. Tajudeen, yes, but he never harped on the prefix before Tajudeen. He remained Tajudeen. And I remember the first time I met him, I was not moved because I was expecting Tajudeen Abdul-Raheem. I was expecting an Indian. So he asked me, what do you relate to Taj? Taj Mahal? Taj Mahal. Yes. So finally, be yourself, irrespective of what identities are there and what labels might be there. And overcoming that made him relate with everybody. So Tati was at ease with Mama Boga, with the person washing his car, to the president and all that. He remains Tajudeen. So those are lessons for me, I would think, as young people try to engage with the whole concept of Africa rising, as we ask, where is Africa rising? Where is it rising from? And what is our space in that Africa rising? And unless we change a few of these issues and breathing new values, new ethos, and new engagement platforms, we might end up falling to the same trap that has been there before. So for me, I don't know, I would not say, I think it was an honor having to work with Taju at the formative ages of working, and at the same time also having to work with Thomas, opened me to a different way of looking at things and a different way of interacting. And as they say, some people are bigger than death. So even on that material day when he had his accident, I just traveled overnight. So my colleague just called at 4. My colleague called me last minute and said, I'm in town. And because they had known that many times I was in town in the wrong hours of the night, so they knew chances of catching me in town. So I said, I'm in town, and they said, could you go to the Robbie Hospital? And I went. And it was a shocker because there were those people who believe that death to them cannot come. Unfortunately, it did, but in his persona, he managed to even manifest himself today as he did in 2007. And the collection of his works, Speaking Truth to Power, has become a reference for many, for my day-to-day engagement, because many things that he spoke are what we're experiencing today. But the push for young people to be more organized, and organized is not just a statement that we are organizing and we're not organizing. Organizing goes beyond the statement itself. Is what are the opportunities in place for you to, and how do you size those opportunities, and how do you engage with those opportunities? Unfortunately, I think, speaking from a Kenyan perspective, young people seem to be losing focus on that. That organizing means that engaging, party primaries that nonsensical and all that. But even out of the political processes, opportunities for intellectual engagement are vast. And unless we pick up on that, I think we would still be agonizing and would not be truly speaking to what Taju meant. Finally, 2007 was the biggest AU debate on the African unity. And we kept on arguing on what meant to be Pan-African, or labeling people who've sold out, who've not sold out, and all that. So here, one of his questions was, what is this African unity? What is this Pan-African that you envision? Don't you see bankers in place? Don't you see lawyers? Don't you see teachers? So the rhetoric debate of being Pan-African meant that it was overtaken by issues that people must see Pan-Africanism and African unity in terms of how you bring all these groups together. And for me, it became a lesson in the sense that don't bind yourself left, right, or anything. The space for progressive engagement remains there. So if you remove all these other issues that you want to define yourself to be, but remain progressive to the core, the space for engagement remain to be there. So yeah, we miss him, but it will be a disservice if these lessons we picked, we did not enact them. to what we do. And it felt liberated to be working for a UN entity with Taju as a head, because it did not seem to you that you are UN organizations. So if you have to fly 8 hours, the rule states that if you're UN staff, you fly business. So fine, if those are the rules, pay for yourself business. But as a campaign platform against poverty, you cannot be flying. Even flying itself is a privilege, it's not an opportunity. So he argued on the bare minimum of what the campaign was. And he opened us for us to engage with any other personality. There is an order within the UN that you do not speak to a few people. And maybe him having seen that order made sure that he delegated some of those. I went to one meeting at the UN, Elizabeth Rwanda was the country director. President Trump thing, because when she came, everybody kept quiet. And we were presenting a campaign we were doing. So having done the presentation, she came and bashed everything. So I said, no, this cannot happen. But everybody was quiet. So finally, the communications person had to explain that no, these people don't stay within the complex. So maybe they did not understand the structure, the power structures that you are. But the core lesson is that it doesn't matter who's lying. A lie must be told is a lie irrespective of where it comes. So you have to be ready and prepared to speak truth at all moments, irrespective of who you'll be challenging. But you must also challenge within the structures as laid out. So thank you very much. Enjoy your African Day, and Taju will always live on.
Thank you, Madam, for sharing those memories. Really sound extremely special. I'll just take advantage of having the mic and start sharing my own experience. I think my own love relationship and experience of Taju started when I was in Zimbabwe through his African postcards. You remember those, right? I think they used to be published literally, I don't know how many countries that they did. And I always used to get fascinated that this man writes postcards that don't have pictures. Because when you think about a postcard, you first think about an image and then the message that comes through the postcard. But as you read the postcards, they created the picture in your mind about Africa and ingraining, certainly for me, love and passion for Africa in this continent, and really, for me, meant me a believer who really remained hopeful about her continent and her country. And up to today, knowing anything that we all know about the mismanagement, the bad stewardship that those who put in power continue to play, I remain a very hopeful African. And when I finally had the privilege to meet Taju, with all the intellectual, power, the power of ideas that, he always shared, which I think many of us always were attracted to and appreciated. I must say, for me, I will always remember basking in the warmth, in the laughter. It really came from the belly, and in those eyes that communicated lots of passion, that fearlessness and liveliness. I always used to think sometimes that when you're now arguing with Taju, it would really be a typical Nigerian conversation. Because, for me, coming from Southern Africa, I think that's so loud. But when it's now switched on to really loud, when it's already loud, you would identify an angry but laughing man who's hopeful, angry with the things that are wrong, but hopeful about what is possible in this continent. So I agree with Maura that the legacy of what Taju imparted, whether you met him or you didn't, continues to live on. So I'm just going to create about 15 or so minutes for those of you who want to share an experience in remembering our dear brother. Yes, please say your name and then what you say.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amin Masoudi. I was also privileged to have met Taju and work with him alongside my brother. But my interaction with Taju, I think, started way back when I was still in elementary school. I somehow fell in love with the postcard that he used to write, the things he used to talk about Africa, the way, how proud he was in Africa. I mean, just look at it in the photos and you know, this is the guy, the dressing, everything. So I kept reading most of those stories. I was really, really very young and I'm trying to find my way. Elementary school, so I kept reading these stories about the visa, how he was criticizing the Prime Minister of Addis Ababa at the time, when he told him that, face to face, I think he told him off, that it's really shame that we still have to apply for passports when the delegates are having conferences here for visas, yet Europeans come fly all the way from Europe without visas and they're given straight away. And this is the capital city of Africa. He said many things. I think there was a time when he was in Addis Ababa again, holding the conference, and power went off. And then his remark was that the mention of Mobutu Sese makes the power go out. You know, some of those small little things kept me interested in knowing him. So I really kept in touch, reading his work. Meeting him and working with him was something that was unexpected, unplanned. I didn't think I would ever meet such a man, the person I had read in the newspaper. Then it finally happened. And there I was in the same office with him, experiencing his true charisma, his true African power, and what people have said here is very true. He was an irresistible person. You wouldn't ignore him. If he arrived for work in the morning, you would notice it at the gate in the SEC building. He carried maize for the gatekeepers, the boarding maize, and he kept supplying them all the way until he came to the office. But you had to notice that he actually told you is in the country and is coming to the office. So I finally reported for work, and there was a staff meeting, and there was Thomas Defe, the late Thomas Defe, and him. And normally, like you know, he didn't like anything capitalistic. If you had any, you showed any signs that you have capitalism, I think he had to brush you, to dust you, and teach you a lesson. So I appeared for my first day at office in my suit and a tie, very tight. Looking forward to a place that here I come out ready to work. But I think to my surprise, Thomas came to me as soon as he saw me. He came and relaxed my tie and said, "Relax, young man." You know, and that was tough for me to take because it was my first day at work. And I didn't mind a lot because I know that his baptism of fire. Expect a lot coming from this team. And I thought he was in the corner. I thought he was going to defend me, but he seemed to agree with Thomas Defe that I actually need to relax myself and the tie. So we worked. I didn't work with him for long. It was about 6 or so months. I was working with the communication department working with Sylvia. And then the news came, and he went. But what we had was the reaction from people, the friends, the network, everyone. They were all shocked. They all felt a big loss. I saw people shedding tears. I saw people hitting the wall in shame. How do we lose such a man at such a time in Africa? And then I think the whole team was in disarray. We all, because accidents were not accidents. The team, everyone was driving up and down, trying to do all sorts of things. So Sylvia, who was my supervisor at the time, called me and said, we are going to have a mess if we do not plan our media work. So try to put up something that we can send to the media so that people know what is going on. So I started, I did have a lot of information. We went on the internet, Googled a few things, went to the library, picked a few things to try and write an obituary. And then again, that was for me because I read so good it was just. And then, of course, we had to send out the obituary and things kept coming out. Finally, all people agreed that Taju should not be mourned. That was the general consensus, that Taju should not be mourned, we should be celebrated, and that we should have a way of taking forward his legacy, his work. And for me, turning up and finding this team here, I think is 8 years later, it's really very, very touching. And I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take 2 more people who might want to share their experience of Taju, whether you met him or not, because we met him in different ways. Thank you.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Okasa. Well, I knew Taju. Let me not betray my age. I knew Taju many years ago. And I knew him as a teacher. I knew him as a brother. I knew him as a colleague. And I knew him as, just a person that you could rely on to tell you the truth. My lasting memories of Taju, at the time we were in the UK, the Pan-Africanism, we were a bunch of immigrants, refugees, students, and so on. And so we were finding out our Pan-Africanism. We were finding our way and finding what it means to us. And at the time, in the 90s, many of us came to this work through the women's movement, through women's rights. And it was a very highly contested space. There was one section of the Pan-African movement that believed this is a movement for all Africans, and therefore let's not have any special interests, because otherwise you will, what they use the word, obfuscate? Those big words. You obfuscate the movement and all of this. And then there were those of us who say, no, in order for it to be a truly inclusive movement, we must address, those issues of critical concern around power and all of this amongst ourselves as well. And so some of these discussions were often protracted, deeply painful, deeply, deeply painful exchanges. Taju's great contribution to that is that he was a unifier. He was a unifier, he was a person who could have a different opinion from somebody, but have a whole group of people who had different political views, ideologies, class, whatever. And his great contribution for all of us, or for me at that time, was to say, sister, you have a legitimate argument, and that we must make time for this. This is not how I was thinking about Pan-Africanism, but you people have a legitimate argument, and we must create a way forward for us to address these things. And it was Taju who, at that time, is the one who created the space within that place that we were. And always, 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 he would say to me, whenever you need us, whenever you need me, just call. And we did for the women's movement. Many of us were involved in the work around the protocol for women's rights. It was Tajudeen and the African who would open doors for us. Because he was not afraid of these ladies. In fact, we would see him screaming and shouting at the ministers, the presidents. Are you not ashamed of yourself talking like that? That kind of thing. And you would see these people taken aback. Or you would see them argue and listen. And yet in the evening they would be drinking. And so there was another time when we were agonizing over Pan-Africanism, what would we mean in practice and all of this. My sister is very simple. How many Africans do you know? How many African countries have you been to? Can you call all of those countries home? Whenever I go to Niger, I have a place I call home. Whenever I go to Ghana, I have a place I call a home. I have brothers and sisters in Ghana, real brothers and sisters. This is what Pan-Africanism is. Taju started schools to help children in different countries. You know, Uganda, Nigeria, all of these places. And he said, you don't need money. You just need your commitment. You just need to, get something started. Get it started. Where your heart is, the money will flow. Where your heart is, the money will flow. I remember that passion. I remember his great sense of fun. He could tease in a really jolly way. But he was a tremendous thinker as well. I remember one time we had a meeting, we invited him to. He came to the podium and said, my sister, I've been to so many meetings. Can you remind me what this meeting, what I'm supposed to say? 5 minutes before he was due to make his speech. Can you please remind me? Just put a few notes and tell me. We're sitting on the podium. Just put a few notes and tell me. Asking you to say, no, just tell me. What is it? So I wrote a few notes. He went on to give the most powerful speech of all of us presenting that from his head, it just came to him. And he says it's because it's passion. And he's led by his passion and his love for Africa. And there is no development of Africa without the love of Africa.
I'm taking the last one at this time.
Hi, all. My name is Saif. I'm from. My name is Saif Mabengo. I'm from Uganda. I work for Amnesty International. Unlike all of you who've spoken before me, I never really got to work with him I never knew him really that close, but I remember him because I grew up on his writing. Like many of you, read his postcards back in Uganda. I remember I used to walk past the Pan-African movement signposts around a place called Chitante when I was going to school. Many of you who know that area. And I really thought this is a great man, a person who is well-traveled, a good writer, a person who's passionate about Africa. I was a kid, I was actually a teenager, I didn't understand much about what Pan-Africanism was, but every week I read that article, I was like, this guy has something going on. Mine is actually a story of regret, because when I finally met face to face with him, I debated whether I should say hi or not, and I got too shy and didn't shake his hand. So I was at the University of Nairobi studying for my master's. We met in the parking lot. He was going to a lecture room, I think he was delivering lectures at the time. It was around 2006, 2007. So I see this man, like, this is Tajudeen. I told my friend in the parking lot, do you know that guy? That's Tajudeen Abdul-Raheem. The guy's like, who's that guy? I'm like, that's Tajudeen, you should read about him. He was on the phone, was talking to someone. I was like, should I wait and say hi? But then I think there was a lecture going on, I had to go. But then a few months later, I think a few months or a few years later, I wake up in the morning, turn on the radio, and I hear Tajudeen has died. I regretted, just like, I should have said hi and told him, look, you're my hero. I grew up reading your literature. I think what you're doing is great, but I never got to do that. But I'm heartened that all I thought about him is what some of you who worked with him have attested to. And that's really good. You're so lucky to have worked with him and learned what you learned from him. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And the lessons continue to be learned through his writings that are part of his legacy to all of us. I'm moving us forward in our conversations this afternoon. The theme of our discussions is we continue to remember Tajud and the work that he did for Africa and for us as Africans. The theme is towards a new wave of Pan-Africanism in light of growing violent extremism. So this afternoon we have about three people who will come up and share a few thoughts based on this theme, and then we are going to open it up and have an interaction. The three people are people I really love and admire, and I am glad not from a distance, but from proximity. And so it's really quite a treat to have all three of you start us off in this conversation. I'm going to start by asking Mothoni to come up. Please make Mothoni feel loved.
Thanks, Jana. And before I begin, I should say thank you to everybody who pulled this together. So Fenda, Dina, and team, Fahamu, Eve, and all, where's Eve? Hiding at the back. CCPAU, Bachir, who's just come here straight from the airport. Of course, ALC, Shavai, and Brian, Shavai's other half. Of course, Shavai is the better half. But Brian, who sort of got all the old friends, colleagues, comrades to organize this. So thank you, everyone. I was going to speak about sort of violent extremism, African integration, etc. And then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about what I really remember and what I really think I learned in terms of lessons that we should all hold on to as we work on these issues, as we all do from different spaces. So in January this year, Amnesty had an all-management retreat. All the managers from all the new regional offices all over the planet came together, and we were really looking at sort of where the transition process of Amnesty is at. And we had great speakers to kick us off on various themes. And Amnesty is a movement. It's a membership organization. The members, organize actions around the research that the staff, such as us, do. And we had a young South Korean American woman who's an academic, and she studies social movements. And she kicked us off on the theme of sort of where are we with our organizing and mobilizing, how's it changing, how are we aligning now that all these offices are on the ground, are we doing better at sort of linking with movements on the ground and so on. And she had a really interesting example about sort of what lies at the heart of successful organizing and mobilizing. And she had studied the pro-choice movement the anti-choice movement in the States. And you know, the anti-choice movement in the States is pretty violent. Like they'll come outside sexual reproductive health clinics, bomb them, stop women from entering, basically to try and curtail women's rights to choose whether or not and how to have children or not. And she said one of her findings really, really struck me, and it was really that when she looked at the frontline activists of the anti-choice movement, the people who will throw those bombs and who, you know, will form lines to obstruct women getting the help they need, she said it's very interesting. All her interviews showed that they hadn't started as being anti-choice. In fact, some of them had been actually very pro-choice. And she's like, so what happened? And basically, each of them had a story about moving to a new neighborhood, moving to a new job, moving to a new city, and sort of reaching out as you do, trying to sort of find where community, neighborhood events happen and so on, and sort of finding themselves in this very welcoming bosom of social events. So afternoon teas, let's go on outings together, let's, you know, and sort of really being made to feel like they belonged, like they fit in, like they were welcome and that they were really wanted. And only slowly then sort of getting to the ideology of these very welcoming women, mostly. And then sort of, because they were welcome and they wanted to fit in, they were like, okay, I'll come to an anti-choice event. And then they'd go to an anti-choice event and want to fit in more. And I think all of us found this story really interesting because, you know, of course, the more and more you do the kind of work we do, and what we have to deal with on a daily basis, the more and more callous you become. Just because the stories of people's lives that you have to encounter are so harsh, and you just can't be breaking down every day. And in that sort of defensive way, we become very sort of professional, right? Someone comes, they're a survivor of torture, they're a survivor of rape. You're like, okay, what needs to happen? They need to be referred here. Here's a doctor, here's a lawyer, here's a... And you just no longer have that empathy or compassion to actually empathize and give people what they need, which is actually the feeling of being supported. And it made me, and I guess that's the first thing I want to think about when I think about Taju, because Taju was never that hard in person. Taju was the big open house. Taju could have converted anyone to his cause, whatever his cause was, but his cause was Pan-Africanism. Everyone could enter that house, and it's a shame to say that you didn't approach him, because I have never met someone who is less hierarchical than Taju. I mean, Taju would talk to anyone, regardless of class difference, age difference, children. I mean, you couldn't go somewhere with him without being, you know, stopping all along the way from anyone he had an interest in, including children, including young people. He wasn't interested in people's status. He was sort of interested in, did you have a fire of a curiosity of something that you wanted to change? Sarah's already spoken a bit about it. And I think that's why the Pan-Africanism at the time, the mid-90s, this intersection with the pro-democracy movement, as problematic as it was such a big house, because he had space for everybody. And he defended every single issue across every single front line in that movement. So the feminists, he took on the patriarchs of the African, Pan-African movement. The gay community, at the time, you can think now, okay, we've all regularized, sort of everyone understands people have a right to equality, at least in progressive movements. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. Taju stood up for the rights of gay Africans. He's like, everybody is an African, and everyone has rights to move forward. Similarly, this divide between North Africa, Southern Africa, you know, his wife is Tunisian. She knows we're having this event today, and she wants us to keep photos for their daughters, who are now in university, imagine. But yeah, he also resisted that idea that there's an Arab, quote unquote, Africa and an African Africa. And I think, thinking about the theme today and how he sort of brought everybody into his space. I mean, I remember when he was still based in Uganda, the Pan-African movement was hosted by the Ugandan government, Otafiri, and those were the days that we believed in the NRI, not now. But, he had this house, and you couldn't arrive without Taju knowing you were there and finding you and dragging you to that house. There would be music, there were artists, there were people to have debates with and argue. Of course, there was always plenty of food. And if you didn't want to be at the house, you got dragged to some place on the lake to have fish. And when he moved here as well, he did the same thing. His apartment on Ratu became a gathering place of every African human. So, Kenyans are quite parochial, right? We love ourselves. We think we're better than everyone in the region. Even after 2007. Tajik wasn't like that. So many Kenyans don't actually, unless they travel or have jobs that let them travel, don't actually attract with Africans from elsewhere. Tajik's house was Pan-African Central. Everybody was there. And I'd be like, where did you find these people? Like, who even knew they were in town, right? So he was like that. And I think thinking about the theme, he made everyone feel like they belonged, like they fit in, and he made us all want to believe in his cause, because of course he came through and everything he talked about. And thinking about the theme of extremism, I think all of us are grappling with, why are we seeing the kind of organizing of young people that we see on the continent today, in jihadist movements, in Christian fundamentalist movements, and so on. And I think it really is that. They have the lesson of the anti-choice movement. They want to fit in and belong, and I think we look too often for, it's economic reasons, they're just being paid, they're poor, they're being offered jobs, or it's ideology. But I think it's this thing of coming into a family, and as we have made our movements not like that, I think this is a good time, and I know I'm very guilty of that, it can be very hard, but it's a good time to remember that was one lesson from Taji. You can't work with women, that you don't create that space of fun and laughter and exchange and people wanting to be there. Like, you could not miss a party at Tajudeen's house because you would miss too many things, right? Too many stories of the continent, too many encounters of people you don't normally see, too much, yeah. And I think we can all, in our little spaces, try and create those environments in the way that we can. The second thing, sort of thinking about organizing, Taju, and again, everyone who spoke have voices. He was really a connector and a storyteller. He opened doors personally to me. I remember most of the senior African academics, who I'd read about, and you're like, oh my God, this person is like a god, or a goddess. I met through him, and he knew all these academics, the progressive ones, the ones you want to read, the ones who make you think about change. He knew all the players. I became personal friends with Salim Ahmed Salim, who's very much like him, former chair of the OU, old Tanzanian guy, storyteller, and he would see Taju and just start laughing. And all these stories come out about our history that we're still not taught in school today. The history I know of organizing for change on the continent, I know because I've been involved in movements, and because people like Taju have introduced me to my seniors who tell me about the days that they went through. And Taju's own stories were so crazy. I remember when he was sort of talking about being on a plane, the RPF had gone back and overtaken Rwanda. They were now supporting Junior Kabila and Senior Kabila in Eastern DRC. He was on a plane delivering arms to the Junior Kabila. He was like, oh my God, there are arms in the plane. And when he was based in London, of course, London at the time, all the exiles and dissidents were there, Ghanaians, Nigerians, Kenyans, and they all worked together. And he had another story. Taju was determined, even under Sani Abacha, he needed to go back to northern Nigeria. I can't remember, I had a family member died. So he snuck back in. Of course, Nigerian intelligence promptly picked him up. Otefere himself organized an exfiltration by Ugandans to get him out of Nigeria and back. And you're like, it was like an imaginable. I really somebody, And imagine me, I think I was 20 something at the time, I was like, just awed. And I think that's the other lesson, that events like this, small as they are, they're so important in terms of passing history that is unwritten. I think at some time we need to make this part of the work to write down this history of how change actually happened, how people have actually organized and so on. Camille, of course, has done a wonderful job in terms of documenting, a lot of these events itself on video, but we need to do it in ways that the younger generation does hear it, because I think what it does is create a sense that there are so many different ways to organize, and there's so many different ways that people have come together to bring change to their continent, their countries, and we don't get that from our history books. I mean, I grew up in Kenya, I was taught colonized, then we had Kenyatta, somehow, and then we were free. And you're like, and of course, when you learn about it, you realize there was a trade union movement, there was a women's movement, there was an armed struggle, there were spiritual leaders. You're like, Kenyatta, it was like one small piece of very many streams. And I think all of African history is like that, so we don't get that. So yeah, Tajudeen himself, I think, embodied this idea of passing down possibilities to let us know and make choices. How do we want to fit in? How can we fit in? And not making it seem like, oh my God, there are all these senior people over there. It's sort of, no, engage. It's fine, we all have a common cause. I think the other thing about Tajudeen, the third thing I wanted to say about him, is he was really both a movement person and a policy person, and that's quite rare. I think right now, certainly in Kenya, we see a lot of tension between the real grassroots organizers, the sort of professionals like me. Not that that's how I consider myself, but that's how I'm seen, and that's certainly how grassroots organizers see us. And of course, real divides between all of us and the state. Tajudeen was not that kind of person. He believed in knowledge. Of course, you all know he was a Rhodes Scholar, made a talk, got his doctorate there. How he got that scholarship, I don't know, because he was like, Rhodes was an imperialist, and actually you owe me this money. But no, point being, he trained himself. He took advantage of education to train himself to the highest level, and then perverted it and used it and subverted it to use it for his own sort of cause. And as he was doing all this sort of gathering people around him, talking movements, he also was very involved in the transition process from the OAU to the AU. Certainly, as Sarah has said, he opened doors for feminine where I used to work at the time. Dina's long time, whatever. And the whole program that Feminine grew in terms of the work towards the protocol of women's rights was really facilitated. I mean, he introduced, I think we had deployed Mandia, who at that time was 20-something. And, she was marching up and down very earnestly to all these ambassadors, sort of, you have to agree to this clause, you have to agree. And Tajudeen would drag her along, introduced her to Obasanjo, introduced her to all the players. And yeah, he was that kind of person. Of course, that was a very optimistic period. That was a time when, because of the transition, we felt so positive about all the normative gains that we were making, all the institutional shifts we were making. It's not so optimistic now. I think the world as a whole, not just Africa, has really swung to the right. There are lots of questions about the meaning of African solutions. There are lots of questions coming up now about the design of the African peace and security architecture. We can see these intractable situations that certainly are not getting resolved. There are design problems in terms of the regs being the first to intervene, and yet, reg interests can be so disparate. We've seen that. We've seen also the importance of having a domestic base. I think we assume supply alone can deliver conflict resolution, whereas when you actually look at the examples where African solutions have been, it's been where there's been a really solid domestic base to give legitimacy to the regional intervention, but also to inform it substantively with the history of the democratic trajectory in that country. And we're seeing real problems with the idea what lies at the heart. of African solutions. It really is a liberal piece, right? It's the idea of an elite pact, a political settlement, which, yes, in the short term might calm things down, but in the long term always mitigates against questions of accountability, questions of dealing with long-term agreements, and so on. So all those big ideas that we had at the beginning of the new millennium are being proved. They're being tested and they're being found wanting. But Taju is not a person to despair. I think he would have looked for where's the solution? Is it in the supply side or is it in the demand side? Right now, personally, I think it lies in creating demand, which brings me to the fourth thing I wanted to talk about, which is how do we have Pan-African solidarity today? I met Tajudeen, I think, just after the RPF had taken over Rwanda. And Tanzania, the Tanzanian government had hosted a very big meeting in Arusha. Everyone was there, and it was sort of around the question of Rwandese refugees, the 59 ones as well as the recent ones. The RPF was furious, rightfully so, with the international community, the whole relief international sort of humanitarians were there. And I can't remember who gave the story, but someone was talking about Kenyan doctors, having heard about what was going on, the genocide, had tried to send a team into Rwanda just after the genocide to exercise Pan-African solidarity. They couldn't get in because the space was so controlled. No, they were going to the camps, of course, and there was all that business of relief industry basically sheltering the Interahamwe and so on. And I just thought, somehow in the professionalization, development of the modern development industry, the relief industry, the subcontracting between the UN and all the big internationals, we've lost the capacity to just do simple actions like that are within our remit. Not entirely. I think I wasn't here, but I heard from my colleagues at Chiang who were specifically praised and CCPAU for a wonderful vigil that Kenyans organized last Friday, just to sort of show the Kenyan government, which does have influence in the EDC, we care and in together. We care about Burundi, we care about South Sudan. And you, as Kenya, have influence in the blocks that are meant to be dealing with this. There is a demand within Africa that this gets sorted out. We are not leaving this to you anymore. And I heard it was very, very moving. And I think we need more events like that. And of course, it's easier to have those events if we know one, right? If we know who are the Burundians in town, who are the South Sudanese in town. Last year, my colleagues organized this huge meeting of different refugee groups from Ethiopia. Everyone was there, sort of Gambela, Oromia, Southern nations, etc. I have never seen so many angry Ethiopians in my life. But who knew that there were so many community-based groups in Nairobi? I should have known, I didn't. My team, sort of organized that. I got it together, and everyone is here. We can do this if we want to do it. We just need to reach out and think creatively, and we can see the connections in this room. Point being, there's somehow, we're so frustrated with what's happening at the continental level, and we have left it to supply rather than thinking about what we can do to create demand to sort out our own problems. And I think Tajudeen would have shown us that a long time ago. I think he lives solidarity in practice every day. And I think that's the whole thing I remember, sort of, how do I exercise solidarity between these things that seem so far away in some ways. The last thing I wanted to say, and people have touched on already, it's already, I think it was written there or on the invitation, his slogan, he signed off all his emails, don't agonize, organize. And I think there are pockets of organizing. So we have some colleagues here from United Group, Africans Rising. All the people wearing red are supporting the African Rising. I hope they'll get a chance to explain what it is, but it's the idea that as Africans we can start where we are and just do whatever we need to do. And challenge this sort of institutional instrumentalization and perversion of the ideas of Pan-Africanism. As a Kenyan, I feel so upset that the world kind of responded to the Kenyan state's idea that, their resistance of impunity was actually some kind of Pan-African project. If Taju were alive, he would have challenged that for sure. But I think unless there are people organizing to show what a progressive notion of Pan-Africanism is, that's what's going to happen. So the challenge is, I think, really to start where we are. As he himself said at the opening of the 7th pack, not to be sort of hardline and sort of orthodox about it. Of course, we all get irritated. We're like, that person is too class conscious, that person is too ethnically conscious, that person is, too right-wing. He was not like that. And of course you miss out if you don't exchange ideas with people who disagree with you. So Africans Rising is one example. I think the ALC, where Survivors, is another. And the ALC for me is sort of this generation's, or one of this generation's attempt to create the kind of science of exchange and learning among Africans that we saw in Makara in the 60s, that we saw in Dar es Salaam in the 70s, that we saw in London in the 80s, where people who didn't know much about each other's countries and the problems that they had came together and learned about it, supported one another, and grew this sort of idea. There are spaces that we can tap into. We should sort of think, well, we're starting new money. There's so much energy that we can tap into already. And we can give back in that kind of way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mufani, and I'm really feeling challenged because of time. I'm becoming one of the elders in the movement to apply. But I'm just reminiscing that most of the things I learned about Pan-Africanism and love for country for me, I didn't learn in formal conversations. I learned in the informal conversations like the ones that you're talking about, that I also enjoyed in Taju's house here in Nairobi, where you argue and the elders are sharing all those crazy stories that we need to do that. Thank you. I really felt so convicted from that experience. I'm gonna ask if to come up and share his input. Make me feel loved.
Thank you, Jana. When we're discussing about having an event like this, it was just less than 10 days ago, we were saying, can we be able to do something like this? Because we say all days are gone to organize people to come and all that, but somehow it happened, and we thank you everybody for coming and honoring the event. Before I start, I would think I would share just when I was reading news in the morning, I saw a piece of news on the French radio, the Radio France Internationale, which was saying 54 years later, Africa is more divided and powerless ever. And I was saying, this is how people outside of Africa consider us. That's how they consider, that's how they judge what we are doing now. So having been able to come here and celebrate 54 years of Africans coming together and 8 years of the departure of Tajudeen, foreign countries are saying these people are more divided and powerless ever in the global scene. And I thought like, this is a very arrogant way of looking at African people. And I thought, what can we do then, speaking about this theme of a new wave of Pan-Africanism? Perhaps these people, they need something new that can come from us to show them that we are not the way we think, powerless and divided. After Uloni's speech sharing, so many candid and then personal experiences with Tajudeen, I thought perhaps a small contribution I would make is on the 25th of May, I think there is no better day of remembering Tajudeen's life and contribution than this day, because it's a day that he thought all Africans, wherever they are, should be meeting and then do something. But also because the day he left us, 8 years from now. So whether you know him personally or you have heard like the story we had from our colleague there, whether you have read his writings and all that, all of us, what we agree on is that he was a true Pan-Africanist. And I think from the sense of the word, not just a cliche term, a true Pan-Africanist. But looking at what he was pushing for, I just remember that the collection of postcards that many people have had, what we printed at Fahamu in 2010. I would say that Fahamu was one of the lucky privileged organizations to be publishing these postcards every week. And I remember our former director, Firoz Manji, in the evening he would be very struggling to edit Tajudeen's writing, because he would send something towards the night and say, Firoz, you can look at it and then post it. You just write, no reviewing, nothing, you sort out yourself and then publish it. But because we knew how powerful his writing would be, we would never miss publishing any of his postcards. We would just take that task of sorting out what he meant. If there is a small error here and there, and then correcting that. So looking at that, how do we take that energy and commitment and passion of liking and loving our continent? I was trying to look at his various postcards. All of them are good, but one I thought I would briefly mention to you is when he said about don't let them shave our heads from behind. Mobilize for 25th of May. Talking about the various meetings that were going to take place in 2007, talking about the African Union government, or the Union government, whatever they called it. And he was trying to criticize this, saying that we should be original, not say United States of Africa or African Union government, something which is original. But what he meant going forward was that we could not let the destiny of 1 billion individual be decided by 53 at that time, now 54 individuals. Everybody should be able to contribute. An artist, a poet, a civil society actor, social movement actor, intellectuals, scholars and all that, that everybody should have something to contribute to. The challenge I think we have now is to look at, as he said in his speech in 1994, what do we focus on? More than 1 billion people, everybody has a view on what should be done before. Do we focus on governance issues? Do we focus on making sure that every African has food on their table? Do we focus on education? Do we focus on health access? Do we focus on ensuring that everybody has shelter? Do we focus on bringing back illicit finances that have left the continent? What do we focus on? And I think that we might not be able to agree, as he said, on the priorities, but what is important is that everybody should be working towards a common purpose. That whatever we are working towards is making sure that Africans have uplifted. I think Modoni did mention about some of these emerging movements like Africans Rising. I think I like their name because what we hear in the mainstream media is Africa Rising. The buildings, the railways, everything here and there. But I think now talking about individual Africans rising. But now, how do we want them to rise? Is it through education? Is it making sure that no one dies because they cannot get something to eat? That no one dies from diseases that can be cured? So we think we have to look at how do we want everybody to rise. And I think next year, when we celebrate 60 years of the first African People's Congress, I think it's an opportunity for us to look at what those who were before us 60 years ago were fighting for. independence, it was clear. What do we want to be fighting for? And I think leaving no one behind would be a priority, because we cannot talk about building a continent if we are having those huge disparities. We cannot be in our own zone and say my neighbor is dying, but it's okay because it's not my side, because eventually it will reach out to you. So I think whether you're working on governance issues, environment, climate change, women's rights, voting, and all that, we should all make sure that we are working towards one main objective, which is making sure that at least each African should have access to the basics, the minimum. It's so painful when we look at those pictures from Somalia, northern Kenya, Nigeria, all of the places in Nigeria. I couldn't believe it. Northern of Nigeria, Sudan, and all those places. How can it happen on the African continent, which has the biggest reserve for Arab land, and people are just dying? I mean, you cannot comprehend what's happening. And I think whatever rising we are talking about, it's not going anywhere if those people cannot have access to the basic needs that they have. The new wave, in light of growing extremism, I think the previous speaker talked about what we are seeing around, which, by the way, can be a basis of dividing people. If somebody define themselves as on the right, on the center, on the left, and all that, looking at people as immigrants coming to take over things and all that. Even within one country, you see these people say this is a region which belongs to this group, not this one. So the unity we are talking about will not work if we see ourselves as groups, teams, which should not be integrated with others. And as he mentioned in his speech, the unity cannot come from the leaders, because they are busy working for other purposes. I always get amazed when they say the markets. The markets are not happy because Trump did this. The markets are not angry because of this. And I will say, okay, what are those markets? Because, how are the markets reacting to this and that? And everything just becomes about the markets. African leaders would say, how do we attract markets, investors, and all that? And that's what we focus on, because everybody wants to be at the top of the easy to invest, easy to do business list, and we forget what the basics are, because whatever we are doing, if we give priority to the markets, as I say, then our message is not passing, because it becomes ordinary people see us as those and us. We are not part of them. So our leaders are busy putting enablers, enabling environment to the markets, and I think that's not what we want to do. I think a challenge, as I conclude, is to look at the new environment now. I think one of the previous players said the strategies that those who were at the first African People's Congress were using for getting independence could not be the same now, because we have new players that we did not have at that time. Technology has changed everything. And I think what is required of us is to look at the current challenges. How do we address them using current tactics, not what was used in 60 years ago? I also wanted to mention one other, I think, sad development among people who are part of the Pan-African movement. I think one of the challenges has been, Mudoni mentioned about Uganda being the host of the Pan-African movement, but I think the division, the corruption, which is part of that secretariat, is not inspiring enough to new potential recruits. if you want to bring on board young people who are at the universities, or anyone who doesn't know about the Pan-African movement, what reference do we give them? Because we cannot continue talking about Irere, Kwame Nkrumah and others, those generations ago. And I think we should be able now to find role models in the current time, so that if we want to recruit new people, we are not talking about Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah was acting 70, 60 years ago in a very different environment. But now, for us to be able to get new recruits, so to speak, there have to be other role models. What does Pan-Africanism stand for now? In the face of people dying of hunger, what's the position of the Pan-African movement? In the space of people killing others because from one region or another country, where is the position of the Pan-African movement? And I think if we are not able to make the Pan-African movement stand out, not the position of the African Union, the movement, we will not be able to rally people around the cause that we are working on. So I think it's a challenge for us as we remember our dear friend Tajudeen, who would not say North Africa, South Africa, but would say Africans. The challenge we have is to be able to go beyond those divisions, whether it's about class, region, political views, any other division, so that we can say we have a common agenda of making sure that our fellow Africans get the basics. We can do it from various areas, whether you work for the government, an international organization, an individual, or you're an individual artist, whatever role you have, there is one common purpose. And I think that's what we could say, this is the new Pan-African movement. The Pan-African movement of the 21st century is the one which does not want to leave anyone behind. Finally, as we look towards the 60th anniversary of the first African People's Congress, how do we remove divisions among people within the Pan-African movement who want to claim to be the owner or the owners of the Pan-African movement, so that it's as inclusive as possible? One of the challenges of organizing the 8th Congress was because of the challenges of handing over to another country to host that. The Secretariat has been in Uganda for how many years? More than 20 or so. And that thinking of being the true Pan-Africanist, this is ours, there's nobody else who can be able to make this function, has been killing the movement. And I think for the last 20 years or so, between the last 7 Congress and the various, I would say, varieties of the 8th Congress that happened in the last two years or so, we have seen that even among ourselves who claim to be Pan-Africanists, there are those divisions that we have to remove. Nobody can claim to be the owner, the sole owner of the Pan-African movement. It's a movement. A movement does not have an owner. Nobody can claim this is my movement. You participate, you give your contribution, and let others continue where you have left. So I think we have a big challenge of picking up where Tajudeen left by trying to go beyond those sense of claiming to be the owner of the movement, going beyond divisions, going beyond class, but also considering that we will not be going anywhere if we are leaving people behind. I remember one of the postcards saying, beautification of the city affecting livelihoods. We are putting a shopping mall here, and there were perhaps 100 people who were in small businesses. So you chase all of them and you put in a shopping mall because it's development in the eyes of whoever is doing that. that development which is displacing people to put all those notifications is that. So I think what the message I wanted to really pass out, or what I wanted to share, is that there has to be a new way of looking at Pan-Africanism. The previous actors or players were trying to get independence, but I think now that there is political independence, at least, there is no economic independence, at least that we have that political independence. What do we do with that? That everybody really feels that I belong to a free Africa which is inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If Achim, I'm going to ask you to come up. And please appreciate Achim. She's literally, as my daughter said, come out of a 14-hour, 8-hour, 14-hour, 14-hour flight to get here in time. So, awesome.
Thank you. I also have a cold, so my voice sounds a little strange. I'm just glad I'm the last speaker because then I don't have to go through what everyone else said. They said all the intelligent things. And I'll just follow up with little additions of my own. I think when I was thinking about what to say, the first question that came to me was, who or what is Africa? If we can accept the radical idea that we, and I use a collective we here, are Africa, why then is the discourse on Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist work so closely aligned to institutional arrangements? I don't think Pan-Africanism can be just one thing, and I don't think that a Pan-Africanist can look only one way. And for me, Taju embraced this. We've heard from Udoni how he actively embraced alternative views. As we were propagating the notice for this meeting, I really struggled because I needed to apply labels to Tajudeen: legendary, Pan-Africanist, activist, etc. But it felt very limiting because my experience of Taju was that he was never just one thing. I have to confess that I assigned several different nationalities to him at different times. Even arguing with a colleague about it. It turns out we were both wrong. But it really left me marveling at his universality, even with his basic identity. I would posit that his greatest art was being able to morph himself into whatever it was he needed to be when he needed to be it. I first met Taju in London when he was the director of Justice Africa, where classmates of mine were doing their internship. And we got to their office, to visit their office, and they were sitting outside, and we joined in and sat for an hour just having conversations about the continent. And it was only after he excused himself and left that my classmates then said, "Oh, that's our director." And I was in absolute shock. And that is the person that he was. Subsequently, I have heard several stories, even today, about how he engineered himself into key decision-making spaces and deliberately built relationships that allowed him to be at the table. He was about providing capacity to Africans to solve our own problems. He was passionate about growing young people. He called for innovation, self-motivation, and most importantly, he called for action, as we saw in the video. Previous speakers, especially Shubhaya and Mugani, have clearly outlined the challenges we face as Africans. Conflict, human rights violations, lack of unity and free movement, lack of effective strategies for growing Africa's young people, persistent patriarchal structures and attitudes. Our third lifetime presidencies that see our rulers hiding their ailments and death. So how are we going to act? What are we going to do to rescue our continent from the grasp of these enrichnocrats who lack a long-term vision of philosophy for Africa. These folks who hold out a beggar bowl for paltry amounts with one hand, while bleeding several millions from our continent with the other. Who create institutions upon institutions and avoid action by creating even more mechanisms and making more decisions that end up being unimplemented. Who feel that we as Africa's peoples are dispensable, replaceable, and do not deserve to hold them to account for the ways in which they repeatedly fail us. Who craft solutions that hurt us rather than protect and nurture us. How will they know that our African lives matter too? How do we, as the people in and of Africa who subsist in this space, how do we reclaim our Africa? How do we reclaim ourselves? Some of the lessons which I learned from Tajudeen is about morphing, not just being one thing. I think she referred to it as subverting who we are and what we have for effective results. How do we go beyond checkbox advocacy and do actions that have a real impact? Develop relationships like Tajudeen did that open doors, get us the intel that we need for our programming. And some of this is also very linked to funding. How do we move away from our dependence on funding and re-engineer African civil society? I have been privileged, and Melody made reference to this, I have been privileged within the space of 1 week to be part of 2 events that did not require a proposal written 1 year in advance. We called each other and we brought what we had to the table to make the events happen. And they have been largely very successful, I must admit to my surprise. Beyond that, how do we strategize and how do we adapt to the changing global economic situation? The funding is drying up. Europe, who's been our most generous benefactor, is dealing with its own problems and mopping up its loose money on the continent. So what do we need to do? But I think the most important question is how do we become Tajudeen and show a real interest in our young people and grow them in order to ensure the next generation of Pan-Africanists. Thank you.
Thank you, Achian, for those hard-hitting questions. It's a good thing that you ended with the questions because I think the conversation can start answering those questions. The opportunity that you get to also speak to how we get to this new wave of Pan-Africanism. Any thoughts, any reflections, any comments? I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then come back. Please say your name when you get the mic.
I'm Kevin James, AFC. I'd just like to make a contribution towards one of the questions that she raised, which I think is important because we have to be able to continue connecting in this context where funding is drying up, which I think is even a good thing. Then we need to find ways to produce those resources. I work for a human rights NGO, and for so many years I told my director, this is what you have to do. You can't just depend on A and B and C all the time for money for activities. What happens when that money doesn't come? So the idea I had actually was that the organization had to find creative ways of raising money. And I saw this in organizations in the UK, but I've seen it in almost no organization in the continent. there might be, but I haven't come across. Now, what does this mean? It means that if you have money and you can actually find a way to make that money deliver more than what it ought to deliver, it means that you can create an activity which would then become a source of income for you, and that could at least maintain your company for as long as would be necessary. And building on that, generating more resources. The good news is that NGOs on the continent, like everywhere else, are exonerated from tax. And this is a big opportunity, a massive opportunity that they are not exploiting. So I think that's it. For me, it's being more creative, thinking and acting on that, knowing that these activities are so important to be left to funding that's not very, very certain. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
My name is Caroline Kimondo. I head the grant-making program at Art and Action Fund Africa. For me here as a young person listening to the history and the experiences of the Pan-African movement that I did learn from school, it evokes in me great feelings. But it also makes me question the kind of schooling that we have and the role that schools have in shaping the dominant narrative. When we have such gaps in our curriculum that don't inform us about our history, when we have curriculums that have traces of, colonialism still, when we have a huge population of our brilliant scholars, African scholars, going to the diaspora to look for knowledge, and then that knowledge stays there, they don't come back, or they find better opportunities there, it means we are creating a gap that actually promotes extremism, because people are still looking for knowledge and for identity. They are not getting it in school, they're getting it in cells and in spaces where different ideologies can be pronounced. We need to invest in shaping the education that our young people are exposed to and have access to. Thank you.
It's Caroline. I need to the back.
Hello everyone, my name is Megalis Hugo from FEBNET. I'm definitely part of the Africans Rising rather, and it has been an eye-opening. Thanks to the fact that I read a lot of things, I got to read a few of his postcards, and today listening is like he was literally brought to life. And one thing that I keep asking myself is, as young people, I personally have been an activist and a feminist, and as young people, just how much strength do we genuinely bring in fighting for issues that affect us as Africans? That's one. And then two, for in all our efforts, have we been putting genuine efforts to ensure if Africa is going to rise, are women being involved genuinely 100%? Because then in non-governmental organizations, we find women taking lead, but when it comes to positions where, like political positions where women are supposed to be part of taking part in policy making and taking part in coming up with laws and bills that influence the rising of Africa, then you find it becomes really violent for women. Does that mean women are not part of Africa? Is Africa really going to rise without women? So for me, that's like a challenge to everyone here as we organize, and as young people have genuine intentions. I know for most young people, we are frustrated about many reasons. Lack of employment, issues here, the access to education has become really expensive, and for young people it's really hard. But can you have genuine intention, at least as much genuine as what Tajudeen did, so that in the long run, we can still sit 20 years from now and talk about you like we're talking about you passionately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jana. Good afternoon. I'm Diana Bofutawamba. I'm with Agent Action Fund Africa. I'm absolutely thrilled to be in this space, a space that I'm calling a political space because of the kind of conversations that we're having today. I'm absolutely also thrilled because of the riveting stories that I have heard about Taju.
I'm one of those people who were unfortunate enough not to or even met Taju, but I have heard so many stories about this. Somebody was asking, talking about labels, a legendary, a visionary, a strategist, a connector. I think that was some of the words that have been used in this space. I would even go further to say that Taju was, from the sounds of his writings, from the sound of the stories that I'm hearing here today, that he was that kind of a fearless leader, a transformative, selfless kind of visionary who was intentional in how he wanted to fracture the status quo. How he had a bold agenda, not only to question things that he didn't agree with ideologically, not only ideologically, but also conceptually. When I listened to some of the stories that our brother Maura spoke about around how he was a mentor, somebody who loved to see Africa thrive. And I think this is the kind of love and the kind of opening that he facilitated for the different people who spoke about his life. I might not have physically met Taju, but his legacy has spoken about the love that he had for Africa. His legacy continues to demonstrate and spotlight the potential and possibilities that Africa and her people have. And I think the political intentionality that has been showcased by creating this space, Yves was talking about how you thought in 10 days you would not be able to bring this group of people together, but it has happened. And I think it takes political intentionality that doesn't seem to be happening as often as we would like for them to happen. My sister Achieng spoke about how more and more Pan-Africanism seems to be synonymous with bureaucracy, seems to be synonymous with institutions, and seems to be synonymous with the African Union. And we know the challenges and benefits of being associated with the African Union. We also know the challenges and benefits of also being associated with institutions, and how to some extent that has also limited and hindered us from taking bold agendas by the horns. And so my point here is to say, I think as we look for solutions around how it is that we can continue to enhance and grow our Pan-Africanism, we also begin to look at issues of how we begin to write about some of these Pan-African stories, Pan-African values and ethics and principles that we would like to emulate, but also see in most of the people who are sitting here, but also most of the people that we interact from the different walks of lives that we come from. Jana, I think what I'm absolutely passionate about, and something that is evoking a lot of emotions in me right now, is that let us not wait for another Africa Day to be able to sit in spaces like this and have conversations about Pan-Africanism. How do we begin to harness the spaces that we find ourselves in? How do we open our houses? How do we open our offices? How do we just find ourselves seated under a tree, which is the traditional ways of connecting, as Africans? Let us take every opportunity to be able to tell these stories, but also really bring those people that we know have the knowledge and have the history that, we were being told about today. So thank you so much for all those that have contributed to this day. I have learned a lot about one of our, I would call Taju, an ancestor, an African ancestor, a forefather. And I think it is absolutely important that we tell these stories in many ways than just orally. Let us find more instructive ways of doing this more and more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. In fact, I kind of want to invite us, yes, I know there are 2 or 3 hands here. I kind of want to invite us to, yes, well, maybe leave it. I'll just find ways of avoiding it. I kind of want us to talk into the supply side that I think all our 3 speakers and some of the comments that have come out from the conversation, that what is it that we need to be doing differently to really begin to make this a new wave of Pan-Africanism really become alive, and on the supply side, I think, you know, part of the things that we are remembering about the love for country, Chen asked us, who is African and to whom does Africa belong to? And why are we, I think he reminded us about leaving 54 human beings to sit and be the ones to determine the future of the billions. And so even the things that here. Okay, I'll simply listen to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll come to that. Please say your name.
Hi everyone, I am Ian Odhiambo, and when we speak of the supply side, I believe that as one of our colleagues has already mentioned, the kind of education that we are being given in school from a very early age should and another thing, I believe the kind of institutionalism that we have in Africa, it's not innate to our form or structure, social structures. So you find that we're trying to use rotten skeleton, so to say, and we place flesh on it and we expect that this being to walk and be alive. That shall not work. So we really need to just overhaul the whole structure and start from scratch.
Our education system, something needs to happen there.
Thank you. My name is Moses Isoa from African Rising. Listening in the reflections, something that was coming to my mind that today, unlikely event that I died today, what would be written on my gravestone? Would it be a short funeral? Would somebody be able to say the kind of words that people can say about Taju? I think Taju was a futurist. When we were living in our times, Taju lived ahead. And he knew what would be happening. You know, he was able to spot the disruptions that we see today. He was kind of a strategist. And the kind of person that you felt that yes, he can actually tell the future, so to say. Right now, the kind of thing that we need is not the way the development we actually being given. Where people are dispossessed of land and replaced with concrete, because that is development. I think we need to be looking at, for lack of a better word, what people are calling a well-being economy. An economy where we can actually have success without growth. Growth as defined like the World Bank. Growth, which means do all that you can. That's the kind of development that doesn't take us far. And I'm sure that's the kind of development that if Taju was alive today, he would not be subscribing to. Now on the supply side, what is finally important? That we're losing so many people on our roads because our governments have failed. We have institutions that are, for lack of a better word, I can say, than an intensive care unit. They are not working. And therefore, we have hospitals which are themselves sick. We have schools where there is no education. And if they say it is free education, it is free indeed because it is free of knowledge. We have road infrastructure which is rotten. And millions of people die on our roads because one person is trying to avoid the pothole. So one thing that's very important which you can call on our states, can our institutions work? If institutions work, whether it's the institution of the police, whether it's the institution of the judiciary, whatever institution it is, if it can work, then we can actually be able to say, yes, we have our supply side working. And that way, and at the demand side, we perhaps have less work of activism. We have less work of asking the government to do ABCD because they are doing what they are supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Fahamu with the Africa Platform. I've got three things to say. Last year, when a group of donors were gathering in Nairobi to discuss how desperate Africa is and how we need more money, and then a lot of us are very good at pleading with donors to tell them how desperate we are. You know where you fall. And somebody from Nation told me, because we wanted to do something with the activists, and I called somebody from Nation, and we were discussing what do we write on that day. And he told me without, which was like Wallace can tell you, he didn't even think about it. He told me, do you know what I want to write and talk about? This is why so many of the intellectuals on the African continent are serving Europe and leaving their institutions in their countries to collapse. What is it that makes so many of our brains be so excited at serving other countries and writing documentations and journals for them? But that intellectualism cannot remove the corrupt leaders that we have. For some reason, we have got exceptional brains, but those brains can't even change a county level. And he asked me, he's curious to hear from the intellectuals, because the bulk of us end up in civil society and in the UN system and within the World Bank. He's curious to know why that intellectualism is unable to change our continent, and why we are so glad to deposit it abroad in journals and in publications. And so for me, the very first thing that I want to question is, we can talk about the education system and whatever, but for those of us who have traveled, you have gone to Europe, you have gone to Latin America, you've gone to North America, you've sat inside the UN, I have gone up to the Security Council. Surely we can't shift this continent with all that knowledge. We need to begin asking ourselves that fundamental question, because look at who our leaders are. And look at how intellectually gifted this continent is. And then look at the oxymoron of it and the people that are being led. So for me, that is the fundamental question that we need to begin asking ourselves very, very honestly. The second question that I want to pose is going back to Tajudeen. I've had quite a lot said about him, and I am wondering whether many of us remember a small little bit of anecdote about him. And that's the fact that he was the very, very first one that allowed Nigeria to exercise power over donors. Every time a donor meeting was being called of UNMC, the chair was always Nigerian. Why? Because he is the one who made Nigeria become the largest funder of UNMC. And for a long time, it was Nigeria that was funding the entire activities of UNMC. Up to right now, last year, Nigeria gave $1 million, even within all that crisis. The only difference is that this time, because he's gone, and because Charles has left, where did the $1 million end up? Paying some salaries in Europe. As we speak right now, the UNMC campaign has been turned into an SDG campaign, deposited somewhere in Bonn, doing absolutely nothing on the continent. I have attempted to fight that battle, and I've discovered for many of us intellectuals, as long as the mind is there, we will follow the money. So if we are asking about funding, and here is one person who managed to get a UN agency to be funded by an African government, and funded fully to an extent that even the US could not talk when it came to UNMC. The EU could not talk when it came to UNMC. When he said we are doing this on the African continent, nobody said a thing, because after all, it was an African country that was giving the funding. Are we able to begin to think how we can reshape the spaces that are given to us? Because many of us have got exceptional spaces here.
the places, whether we be in the UN, whether we forever that, but we go there with a focused, narrow thematic agenda. That as long as we end up with a document that has got something gender in it, we come back excited that we have changed the world. How can we get these places and change them and shape them completely the way that Tajudeen did when he got into UNFC, and to completely reorganize it? And again, it goes back to my first issue. The capacity resides right inside this room. The amount of intellectual power that sits here, if we just refocus it and reorganize it and shape it in one direction, we will be the best. I think the final thing I want to say, sorry, is this morning we had another meeting and we sat with a bunch of young activists, haggard, jobless. A few of them are actors. They came with some songs trying to talk about the Pan-African movement. At the time, it was lunchtime. The only thing was one banana and water. And then we had to end. And I listened to them, and I listened to their conversation. And I realized 60% of the African population is right over there. Not only are they young, but they also share that level of poverty. And I asked myself, and I remember raising my hand and told them, this afternoon, we're going to sit as intellectuals in another meeting where probably you didn't manage to reach. But my prayer to you, that's what I was telling you, is that you realize that this continent and the ability to change it lies with you. Because not just is it about your age, and the fact that your desperation can never get to ours. For me, I will park my car outside here. I live in a gated community. I have security at my gate. So there are limits as to how far you can go. If a street boy walks near me, I simply roll up the window. And I can write about them in proposals later on. But for them, it is survival, it is their life. They can, if this continent begins to burn, they would know where to go. I will catch a flight, I will go stay in the US after 5 years. So I can go there and stay for 5 years. I'm sure some organization will find me somewhere and support me. So how do we connect with those who are not just rooted, but are desperate about the continent? Because only when we connect with them, the way Lee was telling us, will we begin to see change. But as long as we are connecting amongst the comfortable ones like ourselves, it will continue to be a story 10 years old. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the speakers. I think that was an elaborate presentation. And I think for me, looking at the theme on the supply side, when it comes to solving issues of violent extreme groups, including Pan-Africanism. What I would read from Taju's mind is that if he walked into, let's say, this room and started speaking to us, the first thing he would say about the extreme violence, he would definitely blame it on the leadership that we are having. And he would say probably it has something to do with the corruption, the greed, and the lack of focus that the current leadership we are having is exhibiting when it comes to managing the countries. And he would also probably blame the system, the colonial system keeping in place, like the judicial system that is not people friendly, it's more extractive, not empowering. He would look at the police, he would look at all these divisions of power, and how they are diffused, and how they are creating an environment for extreme violence. I would say that probably the corruption and the greed is driving off the leaders to the masses. I would imagine you would look at that thing from that perspective. And I think from the supply side of things, I think our leadership, of Abdul-Raheem, is failing us. They have not delivered according to the expectations, what they're supposed to be doing for us. They, for example, have not eliminated all the tariffs, both internal and external to Africa. How we trade with each other as Africans, and how Africa trades with the rest of the world. We look at the trade between African countries, the trade between African countries and Europe. The trade between African countries is so narrow, so they've not done a lot. There have been some economic blocks, in place. I like the point made by one of the presenters, the speakers, when they say that we now have political security in inverted commas, that we have the political kind of intelligence that it's not sufficient. But we also need some kind of economic empowerment. Our leaders are not delivering that, and that is creating the kind of environment we are having. The violence, the struggle, to operate, causing all sorts of economic. So we want to see all these economic blocks, the East African community, covers them. Once our leaders connecting those dots and making them for us. Of course, Tajudeen would have blamed us, civil society, for selling out. He would have said, I'm surprised no one is outrageous. No one is speaking up. No one is complaining. We all seem to be eating. That would be one of the things. So, my last, I think, remark and recommendation, the supply side, I think we have moved beyond the mandate that justified what happened during the congresses, Pan-African congresses, the setting up of the secretariat. I think the mandate was different. We had a common enemy called colonialism. That physical enemy is no longer in place. Perhaps not physical in terms of these economic issues, the financial that we need to deal with. Handling those very well. So we as civil society, I think, to reflect and refocus, we need to go beyond the Pan-African Secretariat Congress of the past, because the leaders have left us. They are in their own clubs, AU, and all sorts of things. We need to mobilize us as a civil society. We need that kind of Pan-Africanism led by the civil society. Let's forget the states. I think that was a club of presidents who would sit around each other and try to confront the enemy of the time. The enemy we are having now is bad leadership. We need to start holding our leadership to account, asking them how they're spending our taxes, our tax money, asking them the deals they're having with multinational corporations, asking them why up to now we still have mothers dying giving birth. Asking them all these questions that we keep asking in our small workshops, but we need to take them and that level. Thank you.
I'm just going to give to Emily because all that said is the people who are waiting, have been waiting longer than you, and then I'll come in.
Thank you. My name is Emily Usheru from the University of Nairobi. I'm doing IR. And what I'd like to say as a young person, especially from university, I think that young people, especially in Africa, we have failed ourselves by not delving into our African history and actually acknowledging and being proud of who we are as Africans. When you come to the University of Nairobi, we only wear African stuff, especially when there are cultural events or when we have this. Yeah, just these events that you actually need to show our cultural side. But other than that, normal days just strut, Western wear, and all that stuff. So I think for us, for as long as we do not know our history, we cannot know where we're going. For as long as we don't know how to narrate our story, the lion's hunt will always be told from the eyes of the hunter. And then I would also like to say that in being in the university, it is a really great platform for us to reach out to even those who are not in university. Through our clubs, we're also able to reach out to those in the slums, those who are in colleges, those who are in technical colleges doing their own thing. If we're able to uplift one another, as Dr. Taj would have wanted us, and at least carry half the qualities that he has been said to have had, I think we are moving forward for a greater Africa. So thank you very much to everyone who planned this platform, and we hope to work with you from today. Thank you.
Excellent. So I also want us to start problematizing, and I think Paul started doing that. The 1 million, the 54 and the 1 million, and what are we ourselves, the people, where the demand side? Maybe that's actually where I think that's what Muthoni, Achien were really trying to get us to go. There were a couple of hands, I saw them from a distance, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Jana. My name is Mildred Gessa. I work for Femnet. Maybe I won't fit into your description, but I want to talk about 20 years ago. I didn't meet Dr. Taju personally. He spoke to me as a young person then. I thought I knew my history on the struggle for Africa until Dr. Taju forced me to go back and understand 1884. And that's why I want to connect my point with him. That we are here prescribing solutions. And that's great because we are used to talking like this, in this space, at this level. The people who need to be empowered are our targets out there. The young people who don't care about 1884 and what it meant to this continent and how it shifted the paradigm. And so I really want to argue the case of empowering our young people today. In as much as we don't want to keep invoking Kwame Nkrumah, but that's a point I don't agree with you, because I want to keep invoking so they remind us about why we are having this discussion in the first place. We must make our young people understand why it's important to search for a Thomas Sankara t-shirt, which I've been looking for years and I haven't been able to find. Anybody with one? Thomas Sankara. So our young, let's make our own. Our young people walk around wearing Che Guevara. But if you ask them what Che Guevara stood for, they don't understand it. Maybe they have bits and pieces of what he was. So this morning I was wondering, would I walk around with Uhuru Kenyatta's t-shirt or Raila Odinga's t-shirt and the hand size are fat? Because I do not understand what it is they stand for, but I do understand what our forefathers, that time in 1954, I do understand exactly what they were fighting for. And I would have no problem wearing a Chisano t-shirt and walking in the streets. So then I think we can prescribe as much as we want, and we can do this today and next year. But if our young people cannot go into Google and listen to a speech said then by Nkrumah in that hall in Addis, or a speech by Sankara just a month before he was assassinated, then our young people won't care. You and I will think this is important, but the future generation doesn't give a damn. We need them to understand that at 33, Sankara died with only a 10 and a broken down fridge, and he was a president, and that was okay. So when we are annoyed that we have our big men, 54 of them in the AU who own half of Africa, and others are starving, they must be able to say, but we had presidents in this continent who are selfless enough to do ABC. We need to empower our young people. Those of us who work in spaces for women's empowerment, we need to pull out for them the role that women played in this continent in the pre-colonial times, because they did. Sometimes we are writing proposals and thinking we are defining the wheel by telling women we have to have a sex ban. They did it in the 30s and 40s. They pushed their weight around. They did their contribution. But how is it that we want to think that we living at this time have more wisdom than those who actually gave us our right to stand here? I urge that we go back to the center. And tonight, if we can go back, Google again 1884, to just understand how we were massacred like a huge elephant. And they were sitting around in Berlin and saying, take the arm, here, take the hip, I'll take this part, and what that meant to us as Africans, that has brought us lamenting about this issue now. We should read it and re-understand it. And tonight, if one speech by Sankara, one speech by one speech by Kenyatta, the senior, one speech by any of those leaders is going to reinvigorate your inspiration to do your bit, I urge you that you do it. Go to Google, because it's all there. So we don't urge Kina Emily to look for that online. We urge them to look at what the European Union, the UN has come up with. It's like our own, we are ashamed of our own, yet we did it back then and we kicked out colonialism. I argue for going back to the center. That's my argument. Thanks.
What I wanted to say, what I wanted to say has kind of been said by by Mildred. My name is Shinaz Ali from International Pan-Africa. For me, what I would come out with from Tajudeen's writings and articles is we need to take ourselves seriously. If we don't, how do we expect anyone to take us seriously? And when he said this, I believe he was referring to the conflict that was taking place in Darfur by then, Sudan. Because we found that leaders, they were saying we've gone down to the people, we have created peace committees and we are talking to them and this is what we are doing. But in reality, that is not what was happening. Leaders were going, buying themselves good things, setting themselves up in hotels and stuff like that. So he was referring to the fact that we don't have funds set for, but we have funds set for all the nice things in life and all the good things in life. So as Africans, we don't take ourselves seriously. And I believe he also did an article that said something like Darfur, they are fooling us again, something like that. So in essence, we need to take ourselves seriously. And just listening to what Emily and Mildred have spoken on about dressing and t-shirts, and Emily saying they only put on clothes, African clothes when they have events. And I was at another event this morning for Africa Rising, and Ty had spoken about us having confidence in our identity as Africans. Because if you don't have confidence in our identity as Africans, we become second-class citizens, which then also speaks to us taking ourselves seriously. And he also talks of, sorry, I took what you said seriously. He also said, as Africans, we're not Africans because of our skin color. You're not African because you're black. Our Africanness is in our hearts and in our minds. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Anthony Kulu. I am the Executive Director of Governance Field Organization. I have never met him, thank you, but I have read about him in books, so he's a great man, for sure. I will focus more on leadership, because I think that is the major challenge Africa has had for a long time. Because when you look at the situation and the circumstances surrounding us, it is a clear testament that the kind of leaders we have had since the world, they have not served us well. And for me, I have always maintained it that the founders of democracy, or rather the pioneers of democracy, were not really pro, because they invented a society where, if you want to represent our people, let's say as a constituent level or as a president, then you have to be elected by a number of people. So for you, in that context, you have to be someone of integrity, you have to be someone who is someone who can be trusted with people's resources and so on. But I think where the idea now spread, and especially in Africa, I think we totally misconstrued the idea. Because a person like Ngobe, who has come up with a narrative, like he says, when he wake up, he faces east and his back faces west. So, so some of the reasons why he's a bit opposed to the West is, I think, the issue of capitalism so much that we forget actually the specific things in society. We have leaders who don't really prioritize issues. I think in this country, for instance, we have a lot of potential. The gentleman let's spoke about, the hopelessness of young people. Now, when you look at the northeastern part of this country, the land is there. We can do something. Then again, the potential of the wind energy, which can create a lot of opportunities where we can both take care of the land and as well those who are not fortunate enough to go to school. Then that brings me to the issue that Africa is more to do with the issue of the mindset. I think even more than education. Because, okay, I think the other day I was having a conversation with young people, and it was about the tribalism issue. So they are saying that we need to educate more people, and then when people become educated, now they'll be able to go to tribalism and so on. But I totally oppose that point, because when you look this country, most tribalist people are actually people with masters and PhDs. So Africa, more to do with the issue of the mindset and setting the priorities of the leaders. So yes, we can be there. Again, we can raise the narrative. There's a lot of hope for Africa, and let us put faith ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to check because I want to finalize. I have heard anybody else feel they're burning to say something? Great. So you Ian again. I'll just take those two because they're young people who say Africa belongs to them.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Esther Wavina, a student at University of Nairobi doing international relations and diplomacy. I didn't meet him, I was very young, but his spirit lived on. And through reading and watching and listening to him on YouTube, I realized that he was a man who gave selflessly to Africa. And through his speeches, I asked myself, is Africa really for Africans? Because Africa is, the way I see Africa, Africa is for a few people who are in the leadership position and they are eviscerating the economy in terrible ways, such that we always depend on donors for things such as health, education, and so on and so forth. So that question has keeps on nagging on me. What are we Africans really? Or have we let Africa be controlled by the few elites? And I think Taju, where he is now, he's just looking at us and wondering, why can't we give ourselves to Africa and make Africa be for all Africans, but not for the chosen few? Thank you.
I am Ian Odhiambo once again. Let me stand this time. When it comes to education, education is a relative term. You know, we can term the 844 system, which we use in Kenya, as education. But let's take an example, the Maasai community, where from childhood you are being taught on how probably to add cattle, how to look after your wife, how to treat your future children, how to relate amongst the community. You're treating a human being on how to be a good person, on how to be great with people. But you find that these are the system, we just being taught to be good test takers. It's a competitive kind of education system where it breeds these kinds of differences, and it is said that racism develops amongst the lands because we are being taught that we are different, you know, the social status. You're being taught that you're a Kikuyu, your nose is too short, my nose is wide, so you know that I'm a Luo, and when it comes to the kinds of institutions that we have, she mentioned the 1884 Berlin Conference, where our continent was being partitioned. You find that the kind of conflicts we are having in Africa, all the wars along tribal lines, no matter how little the link is. I mean, for example, I'm a Luo, I'm Nilot, and my history tells me that we migrated somewhere from Cameroon. If I go back to Cameroon, then you take me back telling me that I do not have a visa. Just because you got tired during the trip and decided to settle there does not mean that I cannot go back to my land. So we found ways to draw boundaries. And that's even in Northeastern, what's happening right now. We even sent the army because we say that the communities are terrorizing people, but the army is still taking part in the actions against the consequence. in the same action that you've been involved in. So when you use force, you're also, we could say, supplying terror in that region. And these people, let's say the South Sudanese, the Somalis are technically Kalenjins, the South Sudanese are technically Hoods, and we were migrating the kind of, we could say, catclassing, the politicization and commercialization of some of these conflicts. And find that the Maasai who were moving around their cattle can no longer move around because you find that a general from World War I gifted someone a piece of land and it went on, and their, we could say, heirs or the few generations later, someone owned that land. You're not allowed to go through that land, which you naturally use for your cattle. And these people are never in conflict because as a system where it was traditional, we are not being told by anyone, we are not being taught in class. If in your place there is a drought, you can just take part of your herd and go to another person's land. All you need to do is ask. The worst they can say is no. So I believe we should first and foremost think of how we can do away with these boundaries. As I was saying, that you cannot use this skeleton, and democracy is not synonymous to capitalism. So we also need to look on such things. And when you speak of leadership, a people's congress will be more effective than just delegating all the powers to one person who has been brought up in a personalist rule type of system where people are plunderers. You're using the military is like the mafia. You pay for protection. I mean, you only protect the people who can afford it. And that's how mercenaries develop, and these mercenaries will just, you could say, whatever this conflict. And we should really look on that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Wow, I think quite a lot has been said, and I think just to sum it up, from when we got input from the three presenters and the discussions that we have heard, it seems to me we gathered and were inspired in our conversation by one person who did something. So really the challenges and the issues that we've problematized and are organized by, I think the challenge is in each and every one of us. And the power is in you and is in me. It's what I stand up to do that can inspire and that can transform and move things the way today we all left what we were doing to come and be inspired by somebody who's not among us anymore, but who did so much, which means the challenge really comes back to you, and it's definitely on me. And I think there were a lot of suggestions that came out in the discussions of things that you can purpose to say from today, I choose to go and start to make a difference. There's so many ideas. We talked about even just opening your home sometimes and allowing, people to come and have conversations that transform. We talked about just going to Google and using your 5 minutes of airtime to listen to Thomas Sankara and be inspired and be. So the challenge is in us, and I think the challenge is for us today to, go and do something. I decided personally as Jana that I no longer attend meetings and platforms and sit and listen and then just walk back and continue life as normal. If I'm gonna be here, promise you there's something that I'm gonna go and do based on the things that we have shared here. And I hope that the true Taju style was effective out there in the public space, but was also effective in his private space in how we continue to remain pushing the. I hope we can be inspired by that. And gonna ask someone from Africa Rising, Africans Rising, to come and give their input.
We actually always try to struggle with the name because it is Africans Rising, and ideally Africans Rising is challenging the dominant narrative of Africa Rising. Africa Rising is a GDP rhetoric. It is actually about 1% and the 99% continue to work in poverty. And so we are contesting that. My name is Moses Isoba from Africans Rising. And it's quite humbling that on a day like this, when we are commemorating, having a memorial of a legendary, a strategist, a futurist, whatever adjective we might have to use, that's such a day when a new Pan-African movement called Africans Rising has been launched all over Africa. And so for us, it is like the vision of Taju is alive and well. And so Taju can rest in peace because his vision of Africans Rising is alive and well. Africans Rising is actually an inclusive movement. Inclusive meaning that everybody, citizens, whether it's NGO, musicians, academics, everybody. And the reason actually we actually been having this conversation of why we needed something inclusive is because whether it's NGO, whether it's a trade union, and the Bible would say we've all fallen short of the glory of God and we have sinned. We have actually let down the people that we purport to serve. And indeed, if an NGO died today, maybe Mama Mboga would be happy that we are dead. He would not even attend the funeral. The funeral would be short, no flowers, no eulogies. Because we've actually let Mama Mboga down. We've actually let him down. We've actually become, getting into the intellectual spaces. And Africans Rising, therefore, desires to be able to connect up with the wananchi, to connect up in their local struggles, to connect up with these lonely, low-voltage activists, and not the celebrities of activists who we always run to, who we always feel they need to be defended. Yet from every day, we have these activists that are doing important work in our communities. So Africans Rising is all about that. It's about me, it's about you. And Africans Rising has been born today. It's been born in all of Africa. We've had activities in at least 40 countries. With another activity, like for the diaspora in Senegal, because the AU talks about the 5 regions of Africa plus the 6th, which is the diaspora. And in Senegal, we had people coming back home. Like what Soyinka said, when Trump wins, he's going to tear his green card, and indeed he did. And so the ceremony of launching Africans Rising, which we've had today on Goli Island, and we use the Goli Island because of its historical nature, that was the point of no return when our brothers and sisters then were actually taken by force. Today, they go across the Mediterranean Sea willingly to be imprisoned. But then it was by force. They were taken from Goli Island. It was the point of no return. So that is why we felt to have an opportunity to just make a presentation, just speak to you about Africans Rising when we're remembering Taju is quite humble. The question is, how can I take part in Africans Rising? If you want to take part in Africans Rising, please, we shared with you the Kilimanjaro Declaration. The Kilimanjaro Declaration is the founding charter. And in the use of Kilimanjaro is quite symbolic. That in all people from over 44 countries in Africa and the diaspora met in Arusha on the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. And the meeting was about interrogating the value add of Africans Rising. Is it another configuration? Is it another umbrella? Do we have enough of that? What is the value add? And at the end of 3 days, they will say that unanimous decision that yes, this is too good to be spoiled. Handle with care, as it were, kind of like target fragile. And the point of calling it Kilimanjaro is because of the symbolic nature that we're looking at Kilimanjaro as the highest peak, and our desire, our vision, that every African, not only the 99, but not only the 1%, but even the 99%, should be able to live a life of dignity. No mother would like to see a child put on a wicked boat because he's in Italy or whatever. Nobody. And so we are actually saying all Africans need to rise up. Rise up for justice, rise up for peace, rise up for dignity. And as the launch today, we deliberately chose red as our launch color for the reason that a number of people have said that irrespective of wherever you're coming from, we are the same with the same red blood. But also remembering the people that have actually perished in the fight for the democracy. The Thomas Sankaras we made reference to, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Uhuru Kenyattas, the Kenneth Kaunda, the list goes on, the Samora Machel, the list goes on. But also most important, the choice of red, is that Africa is under a serious hemorrhage. Hemorrhage because of our resources that are being taken away. Hemorrhage because of illicit financial flows, because of the increment of the transnational corporations, who for some reason will either not pay taxes, will either avoid, will either evade, will either do whatever. Like my brother was saying that we need to pay taxes. We need to pay taxes, but we also need to see how our taxes are being used. It's not about tax generation, it's not about tax revenue, it's not about utilization, and finally how the allocation and utilization is done. So that's why we chose red as our color, that on this day we will use red. Not that we belong to Julie, which uses red, but because of those three reasons. So take part in this by signing up on the Kilimanjaro Declaration. And the signing up is again really symbolic. In your different community, you're already part of the struggle, whether you sign up or you don't. So the signing up is really just more symbolic to see how can we keep connected. And therefore, if you sign up to Africans-rising.org, you find the Kilimanjaro Declaration there, which when it was being written, was carefully negotiated language, so that it can actually speak to anybody. And nobody would argue, whether somebody is from government, whether it's from the private sector, or from whatever, you cannot argue with that. That's the life that we need to live. And therefore, Africans Rising challenges itself to come at this time when we are in a time of violent extremism. When we thought, whether it was Al-Qaeda, it was so far away. When as a Ugandan, when I thought, no, Boko Haram is so far away, Al-Shabaab is so far away. But we see that with the increase of these transnational crimes, with the rise of the dictator, the governments are increasingly narrowing our space. They are increasingly narrowing our space. Their terrorism laws are coming in place. The violent extremism is coming in place. And therefore, there is no better time for Africans rising other than this time. So my call to you is to be part of the. It is about you, it is about me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Moses. We are edging to landing the time that we've spent together. Sort of, I enjoy being with you, but we have other responsibilities. I'm going to ask Dina to come up, who's going to sum it up and close it off, and as a good African, invite us for something to eat, because we have to share and break bread together.
Thank you so much, Jana, and thank you all for being here. So I'm one of those people that actually did not get a chance to meet and know Tajudeen at a personal level, and yet I feel like I know him and I love him, and I'm inspired and motivated by him every day, mainly because of what I've read, what I've heard about him, and also reading his work. For people who know Femnet, you know that we will not be involved if really whatever that is happening is not advancing gender equality, women's rights, almost 100%. So we actually got excited to be engaged in organizing this, mainly because of the ideologies that Tajudeen encouraged, at least from our reading and from our understanding. Because Tajudeen fought against patriarchy, he fought against sexism, he fought against racism and against classes. So for us, all those are things that resonate with us as feminine, but also with me at a personal level. And definitely it has been such an honor to be part of something like this. From what we have heard from the panelists, from the speakers, from all your contributions, it is very clear that Tajudeen was very clear about what Pan-Africanism or being a Pan-Africanist meant to him, and that he did not just say he's a Pan-Africanist, but he acted it, and he did not have to tell you I'm a Pan-Africanist, but it was through his deed, through his actions, that it was very clear, and you couldn't confuse that, and for me, what inspires me so about him was that, sometimes, in broader society movements, or even other sectors, you don't find so many men that, who speak against all forms of injustice, and speak about all Africans as true Africans, regardless of who they are, whether they are young people, whether they are women, whether they are gay people, but from what I've heard in this discussion is that Tajudeen was that person who was not afraid of, defending any person's right. He wasn't that person who was afraid of holding any leader, it doesn't matter whether you're president or a minister, accountable to what you're supposed to be doing. And yet, some of us were in the spaces that, we have the opportunity to hold our leaders accountable, and yet often we shy away. We shy away probably because we think it is going to work against us, or we shy away because we think we will not have opportunity to access the space again. So we find ourselves saying, oh, you're doing well, your government is doing well, in fact, you're going to be the example. Yet deep down, we know that's actually not the reality. And so I really hope that, these discussions will be inspired, that we are going to speak the truth. We are going to speak the truth to power, and if I really encourage you to read the Tajudeen's postcards on speaking the truth to power, because he really spoke about issues that we are still struggling with today. So they are not things of the past, but also what is important, that how do we build on what others have already done, so that we don't also repeat the same things or repeat the same strategies, but learn from them and move them forward. Tajudeen spoke about, he spoke against cultural beliefs and the values that perpetuate gender inequalities. He spoke against sexual gender-based violence, against rape. And I want to quote one of his postcards, which says that rape begins when a woman says no and the man doesn't stop. I think we always hear about, African culture, African beliefs and norms, but do they all advance our human rights? Do they all advance our well-being, our dignity? And if they don't, we really stand up as Africans, whether you're a man or a woman, or young or old, to say that, this might be, spoken about as African culture, but actually it's not African culture. It is a violation of rights. It's a violation of justice. It is not going to, give us the justice, the equality, the peace that we want. He specifically said that, one of his postcards actually talks about, many African people, both men and women, for example, who don't believe in marital rape, and that's something we hear against, even in police spaces, in high-level meetings, where marital rape is always disregarded, not treated as rape, and that often is also, pushed to the angle of African culture, So for me, I really admire that, he was able to speak about issues that are most controversial to our African culture in quotes, because I don't think that's African culture. My question to all of us, I guess, I think I'm going to repeat what Shubai said in the beginning. Which kind of Pan-Africans do we want to be? You know, and how are we going to make sure that it speaks to itself? That is self-explanatory, that we don't have to tell people we are Pan-Africanists, but whatever we do, whatever we, you know, the way we act, will just speak for who we are as African people and as Pan-Africanists. And also, I just want to speak about the Africa Rising. I know that, this is a memorial lecture. I hope that we get to actually gather again before next year on 25th May. You know that I'm happy to hear that we have a movement that has been born today. You know that actually we are not just having this lecture and we go back to our own business, but how do we then join this movement that is born today to actually say we are all, Africans? How do we make sure that every African is rising? Because we have been hearing a lot about Africa is rising, and yet we know that we are not rising with it, Mary's talked about, if you say Africa is rising, or Africans are rising, are women rising with this, I hope the next time I hear people talk about African rising, I want to see Taye, and see Moses, and see Paul, I will see our Ngeshi, and Sarah, and, so that also, that it starts to speak for itself, because we cannot just say we are inclusive, and yet we are just seeing 3 men representing this inclusive movement. So I think accountability starts with that. But really, I think it is really great that, we are here and we want to be part of this movement. The final thing I want to talk about really is Tajudeen's sign off on email about don't organize. When we're organizing for this event, we didn't even think it is going to happen because we had really few days and people are going to come. From my experience of organizing conferences and workshops, people are like, short notice, I can't make it, I'm busy, I have other commitments, So we thought maybe it might be the same, but then we realized that actually organizing something for someone like Tajudeen is not as difficult as organizing for a workshop, That actually, even people that were informed 1, 2, 3 days before this event were like, yes, I'm coming, and that was really inspiring, that people could just drop whatever they are doing and just say, we are here, we are coming, we are going to be there. This has been organized on zero resources. Thank you so much, Shubai and the African Leadership Center for providing the space. Because if you had built a hotel, I'm sure we would have afforded it. And yet, this is a better environment than a hotel. So thank you so much for providing the space for us to be here. Thank you so much to all the speakers. That we're able to just come up last minute and to accept to come and speak. Thank you so much. We do really appreciate that, and for you being able to kick off the discussions. Jana, for facilitating. Thank you so much. I'm not even say when I approached you. That is going to remain our secret between us. But thank you so much. I've done a wonderful job, and for all of you. For really contributing. Of course, without you, this would not have happened. Everyone has been tweeting, people are recording this. We really do appreciate your time and your support. I'm going to end with a quote by Thomas Sankara, which says, you can't achieve fundamental change without some level of madness. So don't worry if you're mad, that mad will reach you somewhere. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.